Imagine walking into a room and finding a carbonized, rock-hard disk of organic matter preserved by the very volcanic ash that buried Pompeii. It's circular, divided into 8 neat wedges, and marked with a stamp that reads, "Property of seller, slave of Quintus Granius Verus." To a casual observer, it's just a burnt loaf of bread. To us, it is a forensic artifact. This is a piece of evidence from a crime scene that spans 3 continents, the fuel cell that powered the most efficient killing machine of the ancient world. When we look at Roman army bread, or Panis Militaris, we aren't just looking at lunch, we are performing an autopsy of power. We are looking at a logistical miracle that turned raw, unrefined grain into a standardized unit of imperial expansion. If the Roman legion was the body of the empire, this bread was its blood. It was the physical manifestation of a state that had figured out how to industrialize human energy. Every calorie was calculated, every loaf was a brick in the wall of Roman dominance. Today, we aren't just following a recipe, we are analyzing this historical menu as an autopsy of power. In the Roman military, power wasn't just exercised through the tip of a pilum, it was exercised through the distribution of wheat. To understand the social autopsy of this meal, we have to look at the grain ratio. Every month, a Roman soldier was issued roughly 75 pounds of grain. It wasn't given to him as a fluffy pre-sliced loaf, it was handed over as raw, unyielding kernels of triticum durum. This choice by the Roman state was a deliberate mechanism of control. By issuing raw grain, the state offloaded the massive labor of processing onto the soldiers themselves, ensuring that even their downtime was occupied by the industrial rhythms of survival. The hierarchy of the mess hall was a microcosm of the empire. At the top, the legatus and tribunes dined on fine white bread made from bolted flour stripped of its bran. But for the common legionary, the miles, the reality was autopyros, a heavy, wholemeal loaf that contained everything, the endosperm, the germ, and the gritty bran. As historian Adrian Goldsworthy points out, the Roman army was perhaps the first institution in history to treat nutrition as a logistical constant. The soldier was not a man, he was a biological engine that required a specific input to produce a specific output, miles of marching and hours of digging. This labor was communal, centered around the conturbenium, a unit of 8 men who shared a tent, a mill, and a destiny. This is where the social signaling becomes fascinating. There were no army bakers in the early and mid-republic. The men were their own machinery. This created a horizontal bond of shared sweat. If you didn't grind, your brothers didn't eat. However, this communalism was strictly dictated from above. The state provided the grain and the heavy basalt stones for the mola manuaria, hand mill. But the caloric cost of grinding that grain, which could take over an hour of hard physical labor every day, was extracted from the soldier's own body. We see a labor hierarchy even in the debris of the kitchen. Slaves often accompanied the legions, and as the empire matured, the grueling task of the mill often fell to them or to the lowest-ranking soldiers as a form of fatigue duty. To eat Panis Militaris was to participate in a system of controlled excess. The Roman soldier actually ate more grain than the average Roman civilian. This wasn't out of generosity, it was tactical. A well-fed soldier is a compliant soldier. By providing a higher caloric floor than the civilian world, the empire made the legion a more attractive, albeit more exhausting, place to exist. The bread was the tether that bound the man to the eagle. The ingredients themselves signaled the reach of the state. Salt came from the coastal salterns controlled by the treasury. The wheat might have been harvested in North Africa, shipped across the Mediterranean in a state-contracted vessel, and stored in a stone-built granary in the damp forests of Germania. When a soldier bit into his ration, he was consuming the entire Roman infrastructure. It was a meal that erased individuality. Whether you were a recruit from Gaul or a veteran from Syria, you ate the same standardized grit-flecked loaf. The bread didn't just fuel the army, it manufactured the Roman identity through a shared sensory experience of coarse texture and sour fermentation. To truly understand the weight of the Panis Militaris, you have to feel the resistance of the grain. I've sourced whole kernel emmer and durum wheat, grains that haven't been over-hybridized into the soft, pillowy dust we find on modern shelves. To the Roman soldier, the first step of cooking wasn't lighting a fire. It was the rhythmic, soul-crushing labor of the molla manuaria. I'm using a replica stone hand mill, and within 5 minutes, the relatable explorer in me is replaced by a man realizing why Roman soldiers were described as mules. The friction of basalt against basalt generates a specific heat. As you lean your body weight into the handle, the smell of toasted grain and pulverized stone fills the air. It's not a pleasant bakery aroma, it's industrial. It takes roughly 20 minutes of hard cranking just to produce enough flour for one man's daily loaf. Multiply that by 8 for your contubernium, and you realize that making dinner was a secondary workout after a 20-mile march in 30 kilos of armor. My shoulders are burning, and I'm covered in a fine grayish grit. This is the souring of the spirit that historians often overlook, the sheer physical tax of survival before the first calorie is even consumed. Once the flour is ground, we face the sage's dilemma, the leavening. In the field, Roman soldiers didn't always have access to a sophisticated sourdough starter. They used pulpis, a ferment made from grape must, or simply the leftover dough from the previous day. I'm mixing this coarse, bran-heavy flour with water, salt, and a bit of old dough. There is no refined kneading here. This isn't a brioche. The dough is dense, stubborn, and heavy. It feels more like wet clay than food. As I work it, I can feel the shards of bran cutting into my palms, a reminder that this bread was a scrubbing brush for the digestive tract, high in fiber but brutal on the teeth. The shaping of the loaf is where the Roman obsession with order becomes visible. I'm forming a thick, flat disc and using a piece of string to divide it into 8 equal sectors. Then I'm pressing a central hole with my thumb and encircling the loaf with a horizontal groove. Why? This wasn't for aesthetics. The string marks allowed the soldiers to break the bread into perfectly equal shares, preventing the crime of one man taking more than his fair share of the group's energy. The horizontal groove allowed the loaf to be tied to a soldier's forca, carrying pole for transport. The bread was designed to be handled like equipment, not a delicacy. Now, the fire. We aren't using a temperature-controlled oven. We're using a klibanos, a portable earthenware dome placed over a hot stone hearth covered in glowing embers. This is where the judgment of the cook matters. If the fire is too hot, the outside turns to carbon while the inside remains raw paste. If it's too cool, the heavy dough never rises, turning into a brick that could break a tooth. I'm crouching in the smoke, eyes watering, shifting coals with a stick. You realize quickly that a Roman soldier had to be a master of thermodynamics just to avoid starvation. As the dome comes off, the result is striking. The loaf is a deep, earthy brown, smelling of toasted nuts, wood smoke, and a slight acetic tang. It's incredibly hard. You can't just pull a piece off, you have to use force. When I break a wedge along the pre-marked string line, the sound isn't a crunch, it's a snap. This is the reality of the frontier. This bread was designed to last. It was rugged, calorie-dense, and utterly indifferent to the comfort of the person eating it. It was the physical embodiment of the Roman military's refusal to yield to nature. As I take a bite of this recreated Panis Militaris, the sensation isn't one of culinary delight, but of sheer functional density. It is coarse, smoky, and surprisingly sour, a flavor profile that demands effort just to chew. But in this mouthful, the autopsy is complete. This bread confirms that the Roman Empire was not just won by the tactical genius of generals, but by the standardized, grueling labor of the common man. The taste confirms the power of the state. The grit in the flour reveals the labor hierarchy, and the sheer durability of the loaf communicates a terrifying logistical authority. We can see now that the Roman military didn't just march on its stomach, it marched on a system of industrial extraction. This loaf was the physical manifestation of a civilization that prioritized consistency over comfort and collective output over individual ease. It was a fuel designed to build roads, siege walls, and empires. By decoding this meal, we've looked past the marble statues and the epic poems to find the true engine of Rome, a hard, eight-wedged circle of grain that turned humans into history. We don't just cook ancient food, we decode the civilizations behind them.